Good morning, all. I will start in a few moments. And I will look first to Ms. Cott. Are you ready for us to go on the record?
Good morning. I'm all set.
Great, thank you. I don't always remember to ask, but when I do remember, I try to ask.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, I'll go ahead and get started. Good morning. It is October 9th. I'm Nicole Kinsey, presiding hearing officer for the Administrative Hearings Office of the State Water Resources Control Board. This is the hearing on the pending petition for assignment of State Filed Application 25517 and accompanying water right application 25517X01, and the pending request for release from priority of state filed applications 25513, 25514, the unassigned portion of 25517, 22235, 23780, and 23781 in favor of water right application 25517X01 of Sites Project Authority. This hearing is being conducted by Zoom today, Zoom only. The hearing is also being broadcast live on the AHO YouTube channel. Both the audio and video of the hearing are being recorded, and we will post files of this recording in the FTP folder for this proceeding. The YouTube recording is also available on the AHO YouTube webpage. If at any time today you're experiencing technical difficulties trying to communicate with us or accessing the Zoom platform, please send an email to the site's email inbox at sites-wr-application@waterboards.ca.gov or to the AHO email inbox. AHO staff will be monitoring that inbox and can let me know. We will take breaks today as usual. We will also take a lunch break, and we will hold a hard stop at 5 p.m. at the end of the day. We do have Ms. Mullen assisting us today, so for our witnesses and attorneys, please feel free to address Ms. Mullen directly. I will carry over appearances as we have done. And so with that, I think I will go ahead and turn to any procedural items that we might need to address. My understanding for our start of the morning is that we will be hearing from Mr. Resnick as our first witness once we complete our housekeeping this morning. I will turn to you, Mr. King. I see you have a hand up.
Yes, thank you, Presiding Officer Kinsey. I have a question regarding my testimony tomorrow. My understanding, I'm limited to what's written in my testimony, and as I said before, I didn't understand the the limitations of that, but specifically regarding our assertion of riparian rights, I actually reference the State Water Resource Control Board Decision 683, which was decided in 1950, and we asserted our riparian rights in that. And so I did mention that, but I didn't mention the content of that decision and what was asserted by my grandmother. So can you give me the context? What can I say? Can I just reference that, or can I go into what was actually discussed in that decision and what was presented to the board 74 years ago?
So the general rule, I think there's a couple ways to go about this, but the general requirement is not general. The requirement is that anything you state as in your oral summary needs to be in your written testimony, and you can't stray beyond that. A few caveats. One is if you're asked a question on cross-examination, then you get to answer. That's how that works. The second issue is this is not, of course, the last chance to submit testimony in this proceeding. We will also have rebuttal. So frankly, to keep this clean, I think let's stick to the rules here, and you will, I'm not pre-deciding the issue. I mean, you have to offer your rebuttal testimony, and the authority will have a chance to object and that kind of thing, but you will have another chance to submit at least
Right.
another chance, if not more, to submit testimony
Okay.
that
Thank
responds
you.
to the authority's case.
And then regarding time for rebuttal, as you know, I asked for 8 hours, and I'm over. You gave me 4 hours. I'm over that, and by your grace, you've allowed me to participate beyond my 4 hours. How will I be able to participate in the rebuttal?
We will have new time limits for rebuttal.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's
Wow.
just case
Okay.
in chief. So
Okay.
yep, it'll be a new year and a new start. Um, Anything else, Mr. King? Thank you. One other procedural item I had on my list to address is that I recalled yesterday after our hearing that I believe the coordinating NGO parties had, I think it was two witnesses. I had written down Mr. McDonald and I think Mr. Stokely, who will not be providing summaries of their oral testimony, as I understand, because there was not a request for cross-examination. But what I did realize is for those witnesses who may not be appearing here or who have not appeared, we do need them to swear to or affirm their testimony under oath. So the witnesses could either appear, I think, or could submit a declaration attesting to their testimony under penalty of perjury. But we do need to, I think, close that loop if that testimony is going to be offered into the evidentiary record. So I wanted to raise that. I'm not sure who is the appropriate person to respond, but I wanted to at least raise that as a procedural loose end that I think we need to take care of at some point.
I just have on. Oh, go ahead, Eric. I just have one question, and then I'll turn it over to you, Don. Do I understand correctly that even if that's done with stipulation of the authority, you need a declaration to say that the testimony is under penalty of perjury?
That is my understanding. I think it's in the regulations that there is a requirement that the witnesses affirm their testimony. So yes, that is, I'm just trying to make sure we check all the boxes so it doesn't come up later. I think it'll be easy, an easy fix.
Thank you.
Yeah, we had anticipated that, and we just haven't thought about scheduling the date that they would appear to just affirm their testimony. But if we can do it by declaration, you know, if your hearing officer is fine with that,
I'm comfortable with it. I can look to if there are any other parties who have a concern about doing it by declaration, please raise that objection. Mr. Hitchings.
Yes, good morning. No concern about submitting via declaration, but I just want to note that we will be at the appropriate time submitting objections to Mr. McDonald's testimony.
Understood. Thank you. So I think that it sounds like there's an agreement that we can do this in writing by declaration, and then the witnesses don't need to appear, which I assume is easier.
yeah, that's fine. Well,
great.
Declaration can take all of 3 sentences.
Right. Thank you. That was just one piece here that I thought I would address. Is there anything else we should address this morning? Mr. Mooney, are you introducing?
I'm sorry, you froze. I'm not sure if you said anything after anything else we should address this morning.
No, I think the next thing nothing important. The next thing I was going to do was to ask Mr. Mooney if he was going to be introducing Mr. Resnick as our next witness, or if I should look to a different attorney.
You can look to me.
Okay.
I will be doing it.
All right. And then I will look to my team. I saw Mr. Resnick on the Zoom earlier. My team, if we can bring Mr. Resnick up. And I will administer the oath. Good morning, Mr. Resnick. If you would please come off mute, I will administer the oath and then we'll get started. If you would please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead and proceed, Mr. Mooney.
Thank you. Mr. Resnick, could you please state your name for the record?
Sure. Bruce Resnick, R-E-Z-N-I-K.
And do you understand that you're under oath today?
I do.
And is Exhibit WCT-101 an accurate statement of your written testimony?
Yes, it is.
And did you prepare that testimony?
Yes, I did.
And do you have any corrections to your written testimony?
Yes. In reviewing for today, I realized on page 11, in the section around conservation, I noted 2 water agencies, Las Virgenes and Brentwood, would have to reduce percentage of water by 2024. What I meant to say was between 2024 and 2040.
Thank you. And we will submit a written errata as with other witnesses.
Thank you.
And Is Exhibit WCT-100 an accurate statement of your qualifications?
Yes.
And are exhibits WCT-102 through exhibits WCT-132, as well as exhibits WCT-200 to WCT-207, true and correct copies of exhibits to your testimony and relied upon in your testimony?
Yes, there.
And is exhibit WCT-133 an accurate summary of your testimony?
Yes, it is.
And did you prepare that summary?
Yes.
Okay, would you please summarize your testimony? And I guess
Sure.
if we could have Ms. Mullen, if we could have WCT-133 on the.
Excellent. As we're getting that pulled up, I'm old school and I tend to look at papers a lot and write notes. So my apologies if I'm looking down. It's at my printed version. So once again, I am Bruce Resnick, the Executive Director of Los Angeles Waterkeeper. I've run that for 9 years. Prior to that, I was at Planning Conservation League for about 4 years, where I worked heavily on statewide water policy. Also in San Diego Coastkeeper for 11 years. So I've worked on water quite a bit. I'm an environmental attorney by training, having gone to law school and at the University of San Diego. My undergrad was at Berkeley. I'm an LA native as well, so a lot of California experience. And then did a master's of environmental coursework at George Washington, and so that, I'm giving a little bit different testimony than I think you've heard, because I'm focusing on a different area, which is what we are doing and can be doing in LA specifically, but broader throughout urban areas, to focus more on local water supply rather than kind of a business as usual model. Next slide. And so this is just the mission statement of LA Waterkeeper. A lot of it's on clean water at the beginning, but also focusing on resilient local water management, a region that is water self-sufficient. The mission at San Diego Coastkeeper was fairly similar. And a lot of that focus has been on, and I'll get to this more, what we refer to in LA often as the one water approach, or we just talk about 4R, reduce, reuse, recycle, restore. Tremendous amount of work at all the water agencies here, MWD, LADWP, et cetera. Next slide. So I'll apologize in advance. Next slide. The problem of having an English teacher mother, I tend to like a lot of quotes. So, but I don't just put them in there. I think they're actually really important. And I kind of bookend some Einstein quotes that we really need to understand the problem that we're trying to fix before we think about the solutions. And oftentimes I think we do that in reverse, which gets us into a lot of problems. So next slide. And I can run through all this stuff pretty quickly, but trying to look at the problem, and specifically in urban areas and more specifically in Los Angeles, it really is important to understand what we've done around water and land use, what that has wrought, and why really the only way we're going to undo that is through more of a local water approach. And so ultimately the main story, if you indulge me for a few slides, is one of paving over paradise. If you get that reference, and I'll explain what I mean over the next 5 or 6 slides. Next slide. So a lot of people don't realize LA started growing actually quite early, and a lot of it had to do with the oil discovery in LA. So by 1890s, we were 50,000. By 1930, we were already 1.2 million people. We had already put hardscape in lots and lots and lots of places. We built a lot of LA up at a drier period, which means not realizing, as the tribes before us, the Tataviam, the Tongva, Quiche Nation, Chumash, that you don't build permanent structures right on a river in a floodplain. We did exactly that as we grew early on, and this is the downtown area right by the LA River. Next slide. So fairly predictably, once we started seeing wet seasons, starting I think in 1909, but really up through the 30s was predominantly, we started seeing massive flooding because of some of those land use patterns. Billions of dollars in today's dollars worth of damage, hundreds of lives lost. And I mean, I could literally have a slide presentation just of these horrific photos. And the LA River was most notorious, but San Gabriel River and the list goes on and on. Bayona Creek had these issues. Next slide. So of course, our answer in LA, everything and every answer in LA has to do with concrete and hardscape. So our answer was great, just channelize every river and creek and get rid of water as quickly as we can here. This is, the LA River being channelized, but again, you could say the same for Bayona Creek, San Gabriel River. The list goes on and on. And of course, part of that was also building out the massive storm drain system. Next slide. So something the water board should be extremely familiar with. What did all that bring us? Lots and lots of pollution. So I think mine might be one old TMDL list. It might be one TMDL list off, but 99% of assessed bays, harbors, estuaries, lakes, reservoirs, and wetlands, as well as 582 miles of shoreline, rivers, streams.
I'm sorry, this is the court reporter. I'm going to ask if you could slow down a little bit, please.
Sorry. Yes, I can do that. I give a lot of talks and I do tend to get quicker and quicker. So obviously, and I don't need to belabor the point, I think we all know that we have tremendous water pollution problems in basically every waterway in LA. Next slide. Another problem with all this hardscape in LA, it's estimated between 800,000 to 1 million acres of hardscape. LA is actually home to many of the most park-poor communities in the nation that do not have access to hardly any green space. But another problem is we are not able to recharge our groundwater, particularly the Upper LA River, which has great soils for recharge if we weren't paving. Same with the Upper San Gabriel Basin, which obviously deprives us of a lot of potential for local water from what used to be the basis of our water system. Next slide. And all told, and this number is a little bit old, it predates some of the last conservation, so maybe it's a little bit lower than this, but between our tens of millions, if not 100 million gallon of runoff on a dry day, as well as our storms of 5 to 10 billion gallons of runoff, we're losing 100 billion gallons of runoff annually that could be recharging our local groundwater sources. Next slide. So how can we get away with all this? Well, it's the unofficial motto of LA, there it is, take it, made famous by Mulholland in the teens when we were taking water from the Owens Valley, followed by the creation of Metropolitan Water District and the Colorado River, and then ultimately, and this is Pat Brown on the right, the State Water Project, bringing water from the Bay Delta. I think, well, I refer to that as the unofficial motto of LA and most of Southern California. You might be able to say the same for big agricultural interests as well. And that is how we were able to grow and thrive as a region. Next slide. But obviously that has had tremendous impacts. And so one of the big ones being the carbon footprint of moving all this water, pumping it, going over mountains, heating it, treating it, disposing of it. So the largest user of electricity, again, this is a little bit of a dated study from CEC, but I think the best one that we have, a lot of natural gas. So not only is the water sector a recipient of a lot of the impacts of climate change, from the drought to drench phenomenon, sea level rise, it's also sort of a driver. But the good news is it actually can be part of the solution as well. Next slide. And in Southern California, of course, we're still now overly reliant on imported water, about 60% countywide in LA, 90% in the city. I use this MWD map because I think it's very clear, but I do not agree that the LA aqueduct is a local supply of water. I want to make that clear. And that's why the numbers are a little bit off, but just because a good visual symptom or a good visual representation. Next slide. And of course, these sources are ever more unreliable in the face of climate change. Again, the drought to drench, the loss of the snowpack, as well as just natural disasters and other things that could interrupt water from getting to Southern California. Next slide. And I love my quotes. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. Hopefully I explained how we created these problems. And unfortunately, while I know Albert Einstein wasn't talking about, more reservoirs and dams and diversions, I think you could say it's applicable to that for sure. So next slide. This is kind of my remedial, and I apologize. I know this is very, very basic. I presented this at the vision hearings for the California Water Plan, but every time I hear folks talk about water and all of the above and all these, I kind of cringe and I kind of say, look, we need to start really planning our water at a local level, at a state level, frankly, I think at a Western region level. And that starts with, setting the goals of what we want to achieve. And I've listed, many that I think are critical, evaluate different strategies, select and prioritize the best ones, decide where we draw the red line over things we don't want, set specific, smart, specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, time certain objectives, base those on best practice globally, and then invest accordingly. And the thing is, and I'll get to more of this in a second, is continuing that same business as usual model doesn't fix any of the problems I spent the first 6-7 slides highlighting for LA and Southern California, where a smarter, more resilient local water approach would do exactly that. Next slide. So what we refer to as the new Mulholland moment, no longer there it is, take it, it's here it is, use it, reduce water waste through conservation efficiency, reuse captured urban and stormwater runoff, recycle purified wastewater, restore contaminated groundwater. Some people don't love the fact that we refer to it as the new Mulholland moment, and I stole that from Mayor Garcetti because it was that sort of started this taking water from everywhere else. But I think we need to have that level of vision and frankly, just that force of will to get things done, but with a lens of resilience, of equity, of affordability, of sustainability, that maybe wasn't the primary goal 110 years ago. Next slide. So getting into what we're already doing and can be doing in LA, and I'm starting with the biggest sort of bang, which is recycling, wastewater recycling, and just using, we use about 1.2 billion gallons of water a day in LA, about 60% is imported, that's countywide numbers, and yet we're discharging 400 to 500 million gallons of a highly treated wastewater into the ocean. But the good news is, and this isn't just the crazy enviros like me and LA Waterkeeper, this is what the county and Metropolitan Water District and the city of LA are planning, is to actually build out wastewater recycling facilities that would capture 330 million gallons, which is about 50% of what we import, or about 25% of current water usage. Orange County has just gone to 100% at their recycling, 130 million gallons a day. Pure Water San Diego, I think, is looking to provide half of its needs from recycled water. And these are projects that are already underway in planning. They're going to take a long time, going to take a lot of money, but can get us into a resilient local water while benefiting ocean health and other things. Next slide, while I take a sip of water. So lumping together the two areas that I personally work least on, although I do work on these, reducing water waste through conservation. Obviously, State Board just adopted their conservation regs, and even though we wanted them to be a little bit more aggressive, it's still going to put requirements on LA County. We are starting to see agencies actually doing direct install programs, which we think is really critical, invest more in education and engagement. And again, when you're thinking of LA County, 10 million people, 20 plus in Southern California, if we all just did 10 gallons better, those numbers add up tremendously. And then groundwater cleanup, because we have done such a good job of contaminating the groundwater that we do have in the San Fernando Basin and the Central Basin, and we've had seawater intrusion in West Basin. Our agencies, LADWP, Water Replenishment District, are investing heavily in cleaning up that groundwater. making more of that water usable. And of course, the more you pump, the more opportunities you have to recharge from purified wastewater or stormwater capture, which will be my next topic. Next slide. So as I think many of you know, we have Measure W, Safe Clean Water program. I have been integrally involved with the framing, the passage, and now implementation of the program. My punishment for how involved is I chair the scoring committee that has scored every project that's come through, $280 million a year for multi-benefit stormwater projects. I won't go into all the details. This is a great example. East LA Median. This was a vacant lot that is now a community park, but with tremendous recharge potential. Next slide. And where we are so far is we've invested $1 billion in these projects after round 5, 133 projects. Some really great multi-benefit like the one that I just highlighted, up to 50,000 acre foot a year captured. But I think more importantly, there was a recognition during the first audit that we have not done a good enough job capturing water for water supply. And so the Independent Regional Oversight Committee or Audit Committee adopted a goal of 300,000 additional acre feet by 2045. The County Board of Supervisors affirmed that. That is now in the county water plan that was adopted subsequent. And again, we're getting some new trees, new vegetation, improved water quality. Next slide. Okay, so remember, I'm an attorney and a policy wonk, not a mathematician, but I did try to break out my calculator just to show that what we could do. And so again, using kind of where our current supplies are and how much is imported, if we get that 10% conservation, that's another 120 million gallons a day. And that, again, that's really focusing more on LA County, more if you look at Southern California. Stormwater capture capacity, 286 is the goal, but that doesn't get used every year, but maybe 130 MGD. The wastewater we talked about, groundwater remediation totals. We're looking at potentially weaning ourselves almost totally off. And again, this isn't just the enviros. The county's goal is 80% local water by 2045. And this shows how you can get there, if not exceed that. Next slide. And so what this could mean, and again, this is very different than just continuing more diversions, reservoirs, imports, is we have more water security, we have a reduced carbon footprint. If you're doing it with green space, this is another great project, Urban Orchard along the LA River. We're gonna have healthier communities, more green space, better health outcomes, reduced urban runoff and sewage pollution. If we can do enough stormwater capture upstream in places like the LA River, where we can get peak flow reduction, maybe we can actually start to green the river more, pull concrete from the bottom, recharge groundwater even more, more fish for waters communities throughout the West, lots and lots of jobs. So, just tremendous potential if we are focusing the right way on local water. Next slide. Which gets to the idea and the counter that I always hear is, well, we can just do all of the above. And the reality is we can't. We have an affordability crisis. We have a climate crisis. We cannot invest in every alternative. And most people think of money, and that is true, and that is a major driver. If we're going to spend billions here, you're either going to not have the billions to spend somewhere else, or ratepayers and taxpayers are going to bear too much of a burden. But there's limited time to get these done. There's limited expertise and workforce to get these done. But the thing that people often overlook is public will and political will, public acceptance and political will, that if you say magically we're going to get more water from the outside, it means we don't have to do some of the hard things locally. And so a few examples of this. Next slide. Yeah, so this is just a quote, the late Jim Schmidt, who was, an interesting guy down in San Diego, and this related to ocean desal when we were pointing out the carbon footprint, and we've got to have more supply, and we'll work out everything else. We've got to be able to water our lawns. And I know this seems silly, and I put this quote up a lot. I have worked mostly in Southern California my entire life. This is kind of the mentality. If you tell us we're going to get magic water from outside the region, thank God we don't have to make real change here. And it is a real issue. And so it is why I spend so much time focusing on what we need to be doing locally and why that is so critically important and can achieve so many more benefits than the business as usual model. Next slide. And once again, sometimes I feel like crazy because I've been saying this forever, but there was a special committee of the California, a select committee of the California State Assembly. Frankly, when the appointees, like, I wasn't that excited. I didn't think it was a particularly environmental committee that was created, but even they came to the solution that not all alternative water source options are equal. Some are more reliable, some are cheaper, some are less energy intensive, and that's where we need to be prioritizing our efforts. It's nice to know I'm not crazy. Next slide. I'm almost done. But none of this is a for sure thing in LA. This is a huge price tag. I put 25 billion here. I look back at my testimony, I think I put 30, which is probably a more accurate. There's all sorts of legal and regulatory hurdles like Prop 218 and potentially re-adjudicating groundwater basins. There's water agency complexity, 200 of them in LA, getting that public support. But it's going to be hard enough without these distractions of, oh, we will get this outside water, so we don't have to worry about any of this stuff. And then my last slide, because again, I love quotes and kind of ending things. So this top left is a picture of Venice Beach. This is partly why we grew so much in the 1890s and the 1920s. It was Baldwin Hills as well. There was a decision made. I mean, this is an actual picture from the 1890s that this was not acceptable, and we were going to change this. And of course, we have. If you go to Venice Beach, it has its own interesting, sites, but not this. And why can't we take that vision or the vision of a Mulholland or a Pat Brown or MWD, but turn it toward greening LA, providing more local resilient water supplies, more sustainable, focusing on equity, addressing inequities and environmental injustice in our frontline communities. And there'd be nothing, if I quoted Einstein, I also have to quote the great Joe Strummer from The Clash. The future's unwritten. We are working our tails off to provide that future of resilience, equity, affordability, and sustainability here in LA. And that's where I want to be focusing my efforts without other distractions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Resnick. With that, it looks like I'm going to go to Mr. Ferguson. Do you have questions for Mr. Resnick? Or I guess first I wanted to ask whether you had objections to the testimony. I think normally I'd pause, but we went through that typical step with our other witnesses. So I did want to check on that too, Mr. Ferguson.
I do not.
Okay. You do not have objections or questions?
No.
Okay.
Questions he's got.
Yeah, I do have questions.
Please.
Good morning, Mr. Resnick. My name is Aaron Ferguson. I'm special counsel. My firm is for the Sites Project Authority in pursuing its water right. And so I'm going to ask you some questions about your testimony and your summary presentation this morning. All right.
Sure.
Great. So I'm going to walk through a few statements in your testimony on, so if we could bring that up, that would be helpful. I think it was WCT 101.
101.
Yeah, okay. Great. We can turn to page 4, please, at lines 13 through 16. Mr. Resnick, you offer a number of opinions about what you see as proper water planning, correct?
Correct.
And are you familiar with the Proposition 1 funding package?
I mean, I was at one point, but it's been a while.
Okay. Are you aware that there's a water storage investment program that's a component of that Proposition 1 funding?
Yeah.
Okay. And are you aware that the Sites Project Authority has taken advantage of that water storage investment program funding and submitted an application and received a funding award?
No, not per se.
Okay. On your testimony here at page 4, lines 13 through 16, you indicate that we must develop a statewide vision for water that directs future investments to be made with an eye towards climate resilience, equity, and affordability, correct?
Correct.
Do you agree that the water storage investment program created by Proposition 1 is an example of a statewide vision with an eye towards climate resilience?
Not particularly. I mean, I have worked in Sacramento. I know how propositions get put together and how they can include lots of things, many of which I agree with, and some things which I don't agree with.
Well, do you understand that the sites project is proposing to capture high flows during high flow events and to put that water into storage for later use?
I understand at a very high level what sites is claiming to do from the sites authority. So I do understand that at a high level. I am going to say now I am not an expert on sites. I did not focus testimony. I am just focusing on what I think is a better approach in terms of the urban setting of focusing our limited resources, our limited political will, and even public acceptance on resilient local water projects that I think bring many, many, many more benefits to Los Angeles and other urban areas throughout California.
Is it your understanding that climate change may change runoff patterns from our, okay. So it might lead to perhaps less frequent, but greater runoff events, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so if a project like sites were available to capture flow during those high runoff events for storage at a later time, would that not be a climate resilient project in your opinion?
In my opinion, generally you're better off trying to capture as close to source with multi-benefit projects that provide greening and a whole host of other things for communities. And again, I am not claiming to be a sites expert. My effort is focusing on what we are doing locally and why I think if we do what we need to do locally, we will be able to become largely water self-sufficient here in LA and Southern California, providing a whole host of other benefits to our communities and environment.
Okay. Well, you brought up multi-benefit projects, so I want to ask you if you're aware of all the uses of the water that sites proposes to store.
No, not per se.
So you're not aware that sites through the Proposition 1 funding is proposing to create fish food in the Yola bypass for Delta smell?
No.
And you're not aware that sites proposes to deliver stored water to wildlife refuges?
Nope.
And you're not aware that sites has identified a proposed benefit of its stored water that could be realized through exchanges with Shasta Reservoir that may benefit fish? Let me restate that. That was a mouthful. So you're not aware that sites is proposing certain exchange operations with Shasta Reservoir for cold water benefits in the Sacramento River, are you?
I am not. My understanding is other folks are speaking toward those issues specifically, but I am an urban water guy here in LA.
And do you understand that sites has municipal entities that stand to receive a water supply from the project?
Yes.
And you understand that sites has agricultural entities that stand to receive a water supply from the project, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well, assuming all that's the case, despite the fact you said you're not aware of it, would you consider a project that that can meet all those beneficial uses a multi-benefit project?
Not necessarily. It would depend on the project. Generally, when I'm focusing on multi-benefit, it is projects predominantly that are focusing on nature-based solutions, that's adding green space, providing cooling for communities that suffer extreme heat, providing air quality improvements, carbon sequestration, and the like. So that's generally when I'm referring to multi-benefit, that is generally the case.
So when you think of multi-benefits, you're not thinking of it from the standpoint of multiple beneficial uses?
I'm not
Of water from a project? Let me restate that. So
yeah, I'm not sure I'm
when
getting
when you mention multi-benefit projects, you don't have in mind projects that can serve multiple beneficial uses.
I'm not sure that I can answer that question. I am not trying to be evasive, but certainly certainly we support achieving beneficial uses of waterways, clearly, but how you do those projects, I mean, if I'm going to use a local and urban example being part of Safe Clean Water. If you're doing gray infrastructure, diversion and treatment to put water back into Bayona Creek, and it's going to help achieve, some type of beneficial use in the creek for recreation or what have you, it's helping achieve a beneficial use, which is good. It's not a multi-benefit project that's providing a myriad of other benefits at the same time. And actually, I would argue that if you're expanding more gray infrastructure, you're maybe achieving a beneficial use in one way, but actually undermining some other environmental goods and outcomes in other ways. And so, it may even be kind of a wash on the type of project. So I don't know if that quite answers what you're getting to, but it's I would need to look at specifics of projects in a lot more depth to be able to sort of pontificate. But generally, when I'm focusing on multi-benefit, and frankly, in an urban setting like LA, where about 47% of the population is designated as disadvantaged communities, and even a higher percentage has very low access to green space. Mostly, I'm focusing on getting more green projects that are going to provide water quality, water recharge, greening, particularly in frontline communities. I mean, that's generally the way I define.
A multi-benefit project.
Yeah. Sorry. I sometimes trail off.
Okay. So well, let me just ask, are you aware that through the Prop 1 process, the Water Commission also awarded funding to the authority for 2 additional benefits that I neglected to mention as I was walking through the beneficial uses, but one is flood control. Are you aware of that?
Honestly, I don't recall. I think I may have heard that, but
And are you aware? Okay, thank you. Are you aware that the authority will also provide recreational opportunities at the site's reservoir?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So when the beneficial uses of water that we discussed and these additional elements are considered together, you still wouldn't consider sites a multi-benefit project?
Not the way I'm defining it. I would refer to it as more of a business as usual project that bases itself on, frankly, kind of uh, trying to sort of manipulate Mother Nature for ways to, create water supplies that then get exported, throughout the region. And so, many of these projects, the going back to the example I use, which is a very real example in Bayona Creek with a low flow diversion, as a way to try to get more points for getting funding, they planted a few trees and said, okay, it's multi-benefits. Like, no, this is still a great infrastructure project that's providing a few additional benefits. It isn't sort of fundamentally trying to be a multi-benefit project that is, providing water quality, water supply, green space, all the other things. And so the other thing again, and I've said from the get-go, I am not an expert on sites. I'm here talking about my experience locally and why I think a lot of projects, and it's not only sites, it's stuff to conveyance and other things can actually create a distraction from the investments that we need to make locally. And so, I would have to, if I was going to try to, weigh what are the benefits of sites and not, I mean, that would be a whole other exercise that I am not the right person to do, but I know there's lots and lots of other folks testifying that I think can weigh and probably have weighed in on that.
Okay, thank you. One additional item you mentioned as a potential consideration with respect to water planning is job creation, correct?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I think I listed that as a potential. I do work a lot with labor down here, and from a union family as well of teachers. So I am always concerned about workforce development and good green jobs.
Yeah, are you aware that labor unions have supported the sites project as evidenced by their policy statements in this proceeding?
Yes.
Okay.
I also don't always agree with labor. We fought on Ocean Desal as well, and in San Diego and in LA. I view myself as a very strong supporter of labor, but sometimes we are going to agree to disagree. And I think, and one of the things when I've worked with labor, and of course I tend to work more with the local unions, is I want to see those jobs being local jobs on local projects. And again, if you believe my basic premise that we don't have the resources, and I mean resources very broadly, funding is a part of it, but much more broadly than that, to do everything, I would much rather we're investing in local projects. And Lane, a local labor think tank, did a study around Measure W about how many jobs that would create, both construction as well as O&M. In past, I've done estimates of what the wastewater recycling projects, I'd have to dig those up, but what those could create. So yeah, I am familiar. This is one where I would have to tell my brothers and sisters in labor that I do not agree with them.
Do you have any reason to disagree with the policy statements that from the labor unions that indicate sites will create jobs for these union members?
No. I mean, I'm sure it will create jobs. But again, if you're talking about limited resources, I'd rather focus on the jobs that would be created in San Diego and LA and other places through the myriad of projects that I discussed.
Oh, can we bring the testimony back up? I think we lost it there for a second.
Darn, I was hoping you were done.
A few more questions. Well, at pages 7 through 10 and sections 5 and 6, we don't need to look at any specific details right away, but is it fair to say that you criticize the LA region's historic reliance on imported water and suggest that the LA region shift to resilient local water supplies?
Yes.
Okay.
And look, I am probably in the environmental community a little bit less harsh to Mulholland and MWD and other, and others, Pat Brown, than other folks in the NGO community. What they did, it made LA what it is, right? We would not have been able to grow LA without those kind of projects. But there were tremendous impacts to the communities, to those waterways, to tribes in those areas. And I think now, with climate change staring us in the face, all those inequities that we have in LA, it's just time to rethink how we approach things and not sort of continue that business model. So, I may make fun of the unofficial motto of LA. I mean, I recognize, Mulholland and those folks were, doing what they thought. I don't think they maybe thought through things and some of the long-term impacts, that would come about as part of that policy. I don't know if they thought that, 110 years later, we would still be sort of following a lot of that same sort of ideology of bringing water from all these other far-flung places. And, I just think we can do better now. We know more. We can invest locally, and benefit, not just what is happening in Southern California, which is so critical, in LA, which is my hometown, but I think the benefits that would happen to 60 million people across, 7 Western states, where our waters are coming from, and the tribes, in those communities, I think is warrants the kind of approach that I'm advocating for.
So according to your testimony, the amount of water imported to LA County is approximately 60% of daily water use, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I know it shifts year to year. That's about the best number I can get from the county. And the city, it's about 90% right now.
Yeah, and I said approximately. I'm not disputing that,
Yeah.
whether it's 61 or 59 or
Yeah.
Okay. And you cite 2 initiatives that call for meeting demands with 20 to 30% imported water and 70 to 80% local water, correct?
Yeah, the county-wide goal is 80% local water by 2045. The cities, I think, is probably more ambitious, but probably won't be met. But that was going from the 10% local, 10% local, going all the way up to 70% by 2035. I think, probably 2045 is maybe a more realistic goal for that, but we're still, those are out there. That's the LA County, the Green New Deal plan, and then the other one is the our county sustainability plan for the LA County, but then it was reaffirmed by the county water plan that came out about a year or so ago.
Are you aware of any analyses of what these transitions to local water supplies at these percentages would cost?
I mean, I've compiled from various estimates. We know what, we have estimates of the wastewater recycling. We have estimates of, what Measure W currently brings in, but what would be needed. And that's where I come up with that 25-30 billion. It's not going to be cheap by any stretch. I do think the benefits outweigh the costs, but it's going to take a lot of investment. And that's frankly why I worry about other things that need to get invested in, or that will potentially get invested in, that would just kind of further that burden. But yeah, it's going to be a chunk of change for sure.
Okay, you just mentioned 25 to 30 billion. I apologize. I don't recall seeing that in your testimony. Did you mention that in your presentation, or?
The slide deck, I think I said 25 billion. When I read through the testimony, I think somewhere I do mention 30 billion. Don't quote me on it, but I mean, I can tell you the wastewater recycling projects, just the Pure Water LA, Pure Water Southern California, is probably 15 billion between those 2 projects. Safe Clean Water program, we're investing $280 million a year, but that's probably only a half, if maybe even a little less than half, then that's what's needed if we're going to hit the targets around 300,000 acre feet of local water. So, when you start adding it up, that's where those totals are coming from.
Okay.
And the groundwater remediation is more cost effective. I think it's still another, $1 billion. Most of that's actually pretty far along already.
Okay. Can we bring up, I just want to make sure kind of I'm on the same page with you with some of these numbers and these estimates, Mr. Resnick. So can we bring up your slide presentation? And I think this was WCT 133. And then turn to slide 22. So I heard you just mentioned 300,000 is kind of acre feet as kind of the target from these projects, or an estimate of what might be gained from these new projects. Is that fair?
Yeah, that is the target that was set by the Regional Oversight Committee, which is sort of the independent audit committee of the Safe Clean Water Program. It was affirmed by the county, but I do want to be clear, that is the goal for additional stormwater capture capacity. So, and hopefully my math is good. I grew up as a water quality person, so I tend to think more in MGD. And I'm going to give that caveat again. I'm an attorney, not a mathematician or a mathematician. So, an additional stormwater capture capacity in the year where it's quite wet, you can actually exceed capacity because the water gets recharged, gets pumped, and another storms come in. But most years, we don't have that many wet years in LA, although we've had a couple quite wet years recently. So all told, I think some of the estimates that's a more realistic of what we would actually get on an average year would be another 130 MGD. And I think if I do my math right, I think that was the number I was using when I added up what our potential local supply could be.
Okay.
Yeah, that is,
Sorry.
I was using the 130 MGD number, not the 286, which is capacity.
Okay. So when you mentioned 25 to 30 billion dollars, is that the estimate for implementing the projects that are categorized here on slide 22 as new sources of local water?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. That's
And with, again, the biggest, by far the biggest cost is in the wastewater recycling, although, and this is where it gets a little bit challenging. LADWP and their estimates around that, which is called Pure Water LA, they include in their estimates a lot of the groundwater recharge and cleanup and things like that. So it gets a little hard for sort of apples to apples. But the best guess, and I've kind of run this number by local water officials, is that sort of 25, 30 billion total.
okay. And when you say 300,000 acre feet, is your understanding that would be an annual average that would be available if all these projects had been implemented?
The 300,000 acre feet, that's specifically the goal for stormwater capture for Safe Clean Water, and that would be stormwater capture capacity. So that would be how much capacity you're building for an optimal storm. It would not be how much you would be able to yield from a typical year, and that's why I use the 130 MGD as maybe a more realistic average yield.
Okay.
And that's obviously going to be the most dependent on weather patterns. There's, when we had a really rainy season, we actually got half of the water we need countywide for 10 million people just from stormwater capture. And that is without all this additional capacity. And even with that, and I live right off Iona Creek, and I often go to the river, particularly in rains, the LA River, making sure it's not overflowing. You're still seeing masses and masses of water flowing down Iona Creek and LA River that you go, God, if we could capture that, we could really do a lot for local water. And also, maybe even more passionate for me is if we can capture enough of that, maybe we can actually start to regreen our rivers in LA.
Okay, I appreciate these clarifications. So I think what I'm understanding your slide to say then is it's the 660 plus MGD is really maybe the number to focus on. Like if you were to implement these projects and assuming the 130 as opposed to 286 for stormwater, you'd get a number in the range of 660 MGD.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's 660 MGD is what to achieve that, you're saying an expenditure of about 25 to 30 billion would be necessary.
Yeah, that's my best guess.
Okay.
Before this last round of inflation, it would have been a little bit lower, probably 20 billion, but we've seen prices go up quite a bit in the stormwater, really in all infrastructure projects, as I'm sure you know.
So have you conducted any assessments? Are you aware of any assessments of what it might mean to the communities you say that may have challenges with affording increases in water rates if all these projects were to be implemented with those sorts of costs?
We have not. That frankly is kind of the assessment that I would like to see agencies do, but also what the benefits are. I mean, these communities bear, and I don't know how much time you spend in LA, and I love LA. I'm an LA native. But there's a lot of communities that really struggle with lack of green space, extreme heat, from all the hardscape. And so there, the benefits of all the local water, improved water quality, which has its own cost, but really that greening, those nature-based solutions, there is a lot to be potentially gained. And certainly I went out a lot on the campaign trail for Measure W, the Safe Clean Water program, and was speaking a lot at frontline community groups. And that was the main thing that we heard was the desire for more greening in LA and projects that, yes, would provide water quality and water supply, but would also be enhancing local communities. But no, the water rate, I mean, that is a big issue. And that's why I want to make sure that we are investing in what we think are the best possible projects. Excuse me.
So in section 7 of your testimony, starting on page 10, you discuss 4 strategies recommended by LA Waterkeeper, and these are the reduce, reuse, recycle, and restore strategies, correct?
Yeah, I like to keep things simple for the public. They already know 3 of them, so just add 1 more.
Okay.
Yeah, and reduce
By that,
being
you mean add to
conservation.
restore?
Yeah, reduce
Okay.
being.
Sorry, I didn't quite. There was overlap there.
Oh, sorry.
The question, they already know 3 of them, so just add 1 more.
Yeah, my question was, when you say add 1 more, are you referring to restore?
Yes,
groundwater.
correct.
Yeah, okay. So have you considered whether and how agencies in either LA County or the Southern California area have used these 4 strategies now and how they're planning to use them in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a lot of my written testimony was focusing on that. Again, I obviously know LA a lot more than I know other places in Southern California, although I do know a little bit. I did run San Diego Coastkeeper. I was on the board till recently. So, overall, I would say, and I'll just use LA as an example. We've been pretty good on conservation. That doesn't mean we can't get another 10% or 15%. So I always make a point to applaud LADWP. We've done, we've grown population and reduced overall water consumption in the region, and we're at about 70, high 70s for I think residential use, and about a little over 100 for all-in use. And for a big city, that's good, but it's not worldwide best practice. But they've done a good job. But they are planning to do more. And I mentioned one of the big changes is if we're going to increase that conservation, a lot of that I think is going to come through landscaping and places like Orange County and LA and San Diego, and agencies who had been long reluctant to do direct install turf replacement are finally moving in that direction, including LADWP. MWD has been considering it. So they've done a good job, and I want to applaud them, particularly LA. I don't know if Orange County and San Diego have done as good a job, but they still can do more. On the stormwater side, obviously stormwater fees have been some of the hardest to raise. That's why what LA did with Measure W was so important. It's still not enough money, even the 280 million a year, but we just want to use that money more effectively. So we're doing watershed planning as part of the Safe Clean Water program that also came out of the audit, with really a goal for increasing the water supply and the greening benefits of the next $1 billion of investment. City of San Diego has been looking to do a similar measure to Measure W, so they're focusing a lot on the wastewater recycling.
Mr. Resnick,
Yeah.
do you I apologize for interrupting you, but do you mind if we kind of walk through each of these maybe one at a time and ask you?
Sure. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no, I started that by asking you the broader question, but if you don't mind, it may be helpful just for the record to kind of keep them separate. So with respect to conservation regulations, which you mentioned, do you agree that metropolitan water districts demand projections have historically accounted for conservation regulations and conservation efforts?
I am not an expert on that. Dr. Heather Cooley, I think, is probably the person I always look to. But no, I think most water agencies, including Met, tend to overestimate future demand and then plan for that rather than what we really can achieve, is my understanding. I don't claim to be the absolute expert on that, but that's my understanding.
Okay. Can we bring up I've sent in a handful of documents, Ms. Kinsey, this morning, and we had to send a share file link for Metropolitan's 2020 Urban Water Management Plan.
I think we're ready with all of them.
Okay, if we could bring that up, that would be
all right.
helpful.
The large file, the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan.
Yes.
Thanks.
While we bring this up, Mr. Resnick, have you reviewed Metropolitan Water District's 2020 Urban Water Management Plan?
No, I had staff review it at the time. I worked a little bit more on the LADWP UWIMP, but even that I haven't looked at it since it got adopted. I know we're going to be going into a new round.
Okay, so you may have some familiarity. If I were to ask you some
familiar, but more with LADWPs than METs. I had one of the staff people reviewing the MET, so I never really looked at that.
Okay. Well, if we could at least give it a shot, since it sounds like you have some familiarity.
Yeah.
We're having a little trouble with the file, Mr. Ferguson. I apologize. So
okay.
It may not be you, it may be us, but it may take another moment or two.
Okay.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who has technology issues, which I always have.
I believe we have it.
Okay, great.
We have it. It's just a matter of opening it. Here we go.
Great. And can we, Mr. Resnick, does this appear to be Metropolitan's 2020 Urban Water Management Plan?
I will, sure, it looks like it could be, it looks like it is. I don't think you're trying to pass another plan off on me.
Okay. Can we turn to page 212?
If I may, is this being introduced as an exhibit or?
Yes, I would like to introduce it as an exhibit, yep, and mark it. Thank
With
you.
some number that we come up with. Let me see if
Yes.
I can get that number.
I think it might be we might be on sites 285.
It will be sites 286.
We have it. Thank you. And Mr. Ferguson, can you repeat the page number,
Yeah,
please?
2-12.
Let's see. Do you happen to have a PDF page?
I don't. Sorry.
That's okay. We'll find it.
Yeah. And I will just note while we're pulling it up, yeah, I definitely did not look at this plan. So it's none of this is ringing familiar a bell, but I'll do my best to answer what I can.
Okay.
What?
Yeah, I think we're going the wrong direction.
That's what I thought. So you said 212, right? And we're still in the ones.
I apologize for interjecting. I believe that 2-12 is PDF page 91.
Thank you.
Sorry, who just spoke about 291?
This is Jenna Mandel-Rice.
Great, thank you very much. So on PDF page 291 of sites 286, Mr. Resnick, does this appear to be Metropolitan's oh, can we scroll down a little bit? I apologize.
And at the risk of blowing this up, is it possible? Do we think it's possible? I'm talking to my team to zoom in. Oh, there we go. It is possible. Thank you.
So, Mr. Resnick, does this table appear to be, include demand projections for a single dry year for the period 2025 to 2045 in metropolitan service area?
And honestly, and with it being blown up, I can't. I mean, I can see supply sources listed. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
Can we actually reduce it?
Yeah, I trust. I trust that's what it is. If that's what you say it is.
Okay, sorry, this is so challenging. I didn't.
It's okay.
Is there a caption to the?
Are we trying to look at the whole thing, Mr. Ferguson? What are we?
Yes, I think that would be helpful. So
Okay.
he gets the full picture.
Okay, there we get the demand.
There we go.
Yes.
Thank you. So does this appear to reflect total demands, conservation, local supplies, and demands on the metropolitan service area itself?
Yes, that does not mean to imply I agree with those estimated demands, but yes, that is what it is.
Yeah, so is your understanding that section B under the tab total conservation reflects an amount of water that metropolitan essentially anticipates being subtracted, if you will, from the demand in the upper section, total demands?
Yes.
Okay. So in that respect, I want to go back to the question I'd originally asked you. does it appear that Metropolitan is historically considered conservation when evaluating its demand projections?
Objection, chart is based upon the future projections as opposed to, those are all dates in the future, not historical.
So, Mr. Resnick, this is a MWD's 2020 Urban Water Management Plan, correct?
Correct.
And so it was prepared prior, probably around 2020, 2021 timeframe, correct?
Yes.
So at that point in time, when this plan was prepared, would you agree that Metropolitan was accounting for conservation when it was evaluating demands in its service area?
Accounting, yes. Accurately accounting, no. And to get to what I thought your first question is sort of demand. We have a region in LA, and again, I can't speak as much to Orange County or San Diego, that has actually seen overall municipal and industrial demand reduce over time, despite fairly large population growth. And if you see here, they expect demand to actually continue to increase every 5-year period. That has not been the historic trend. Again, Heather Cooley could speak to this much more intelligently than I can. And we're actually seeing decreased population, and certainly in LA, and I think maybe throughout Southern California. So, yes, they do account for some conservation. Are they accounting for very aggressive conservation? I would say no. And their baseline estimate of demand, I think, is too high anyway. So I would say they're underestimating what we can do through conservation and local supplies.
Well, this table does show an increase in conservation over the 20-year period, correct? Of about 100,000 acre feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would also note this was before the State Water Board adoption of the conservation regs. It was also under the previous administration at MWD, which I do not think was as aggressive. There was, I know, one big year where a bunch of money went into conservation, and kind of a flush year, but I think generally was less focused on maybe local supplies and conservation than the current administration. I know there's a lot going on at Met right now. I'm in the middle of that as well, but I think we are seeing MWD move in a direction that is more focusing on local sources.
Okay. Can we scroll down to table 213? I'm sorry, it's table 2.2 on page 213. And that's PDF page.
Yeah, it's just scrolling right up from where you are.
92.
Sorry.
Because we don't have Ms. Mullen driving at the moment. We had to share a different screen. But Mr. Anderson is doing a fine job.
So, Mr. Resnick, on PDF page 92 of sites 286, in table 2.2, it reflects, oh, can we go back up, please? It reflects Metropolitan's estimate of demands, conservation, and local supplies in a 5-year drought, correct?
Yes.
And in this sort of a hydrologic scenario, Metropolitan is anticipating increasing amounts of conservation over a 20-year period, correct?
Yeah, yeah, although again, it seems very odd that in a 5-year drought, total demand would go up 540,000 acre feet, and conservation is significantly less than that. That does not seem how that we have actually reacted. I mean, our last major significant drought, we reduced about 25%. We didn't quite meet the governor's goal of 25%, but I think we were at 24%. So it's so yes, I mean, I think we look at these charts and we just see different things, because I see an agency that is overestimating demand over the next 20 years. And I think if you had the UWIM coming out next, I don't think you would see that.
Well, with respect to what we may agree on, and I think you indicated this, is that with respect to conservation, it does show an estimate of an increase in conserved water, correct? Across
Yes.
the period. Okay. Okay. Can we scroll down to the next page? So this is page PDF 93 of sites 286 and table 2.3. Mr. Resnick, this is a very similar table to the last two we looked at, correct? But it's showing total demands, conservation, and local supplies in a normal year, correct?
Yes.
And similar to the other two tables, this table shows an estimated increase in conservation over the 20-year period, correct?
Yes. With all the caveats I gave to the other charts.
Okay, so So would you agree that conservation regulations, let me start again. So would you agree that conservation already influences project planning in the metropolitan service area?
Oh, that's hard for me to answer. I mean, do they show conservation here as part? Yes. But if you're overstating what your total demand is going to be, and their planned conservation doesn't match what I think is an overestimation of total demand, in reality, I don't think you're planning for conservation. I know what you're trying to get at, and I don't know how to answer it anymore, honestly. I mean, I'm actually a little dumbfounded looking at how much they're proposing, they're projecting increased demand when that is not the experience that we've had here in Southern California. So is conservation on that as a listed thing? Yes, it is. But
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
what is your basis for stating that Metropolitan is overstating its demands, or overstating the demands within the urban retail agencies within its service area?
As I mentioned, and I mean, this I would have to do work and dig up charts, but LA County, which is, almost half of the population of Southern California, LA County has seen dramatic increase in population and actually reduced water demands over that same period. And I'm talking over like 30, 40 years. Other agencies are also trying to build, we've had these droughts, people have been conserving. And I know you're saying, well, there is some increase, but there's always been a reputation of water agencies overestimate what your demands are, and then you build infrastructure for kind of inflated demands. And this, like I said, I am not the expert on this. There are people who know much more than I do, and I have not looked at this UWIMP before now, so I'm just doing it off the cuff. But I mean, that's what it looks like is happening. I mean, that's a fairly big increase in demand from 2025 to 2045. And again, I mean, we're actually talking about potential population declines. Plus, with climate change, people are conserving more. They have conserved more since that time. And we have statewide conservation regs, which even if I don't think they were strong enough, I don't know that they're accounted for in this. So yeah, it's hard to, on the fly, it's hard to make much of this chart and whether if they were redoing it now, these would be the kinds of numbers you'd be looking at. I tend to be fairly skeptical of that.
So I just want to be certain, you haven't,
Sorry to interrupt, but this has come up a few times. EWIMS or something like that. I'm not understanding that term. EWIMS? Do you know what I'm
I
referring to?
think we're trying to recall the acronym.
This plan is an UWIMP, so that's an urban water management plan. UWIMPs are urban water management plans, which water supply agencies have to prepare every 5 years.
UWMP.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. That was coming up and I wasn't sure what you were saying. Thank you.
It gets very confusing because we have EWIMPs and WIMPs and a whole host of other anything, any vowel you can put in front of WIMP, there is some version of that. But this is an UWIMP, yeah, urban water management plan.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Resnick, I just want to be clear. You haven't offered any evidence in this proceeding that would indicate or that would support your assertion that Metropolitan may be overstating its demand projections, have you?
No, I did not know this would come up.
Okay. And with respect to making, I think you mentioned making conservation a way of life, conservation regulations, correct?
Yes.
And your understanding is that's kind of just now becoming a reality in terms of needing to plan for what that conservation into the future, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so do you have any reason to believe that in plans perhaps that post-date this plan or that may come in the future that Metropolitan prepares that they wouldn't account for the conservation that would be required under that regulation?
No, I would guess they would, yeah.
Okay.
Account for it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your patience with this exhibit.
No worries.
If we can move on to stormwater capture and reuse, which is your second strategy. Are you aware that and I'm moving outside of LA County, are you aware that San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District, which is a potential site's water supply beneficiary, accounts for capture and reuse of stormwater in its supply and demand analyses?
I mean, I don't know that. I don't know San Bernardino, but it makes sense. And most agencies do account for some level of that.
All right, can we bring up FR 109, please? And then if Mr. Resnick, sorry, I was making sure I had the right exhibit. Can we turn to page 5.8, please? Oh, no. Bear with me a second. I think I might have the wrong exhibit.
Mr. Ferguson, actually, maybe I can suggest a break since we're out of.
Yeah, let's do that. I apologize.
Good time
Yep.
for it, and then we can double check this. So let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back at 10:41.
Awesome. Should we stay on this and rejoin, or do we just stay?
Yeah, stay on the platform, but usually we go off camera and on mute. It's the typical.
Yes.
I apparently took my jacket off and didn't put it back on. I apologize. I'll fix that next time.
Okay. I
We're
didn't put my
joking.
tie on either. So.
I think with that, back to you, Mr. Ferguson. You can let us know if we had the right exhibit or we need a different exhibit and go from there.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that was the correct exhibit, FOR 109. Yeah, can we turn to the cover page, please? Great. Mr. Resnick, I'll represent to you that this is the Upper Santa Ana River Watershed Integrated Regional Urban Water Management Plan for 2020. Are you familiar with this document?
No.
Are you aware that San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District is a water wholesaler in this region?
No.
Okay, so you're not aware that San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District serves water and manages water in this area?
I mean, not per se. There's a lot of water agencies, so no. I mean, I've heard the name, but no.
Okay. Are you aware that San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District is a participant in the sites project?
I did not know that, no.
Okay. Okay, could we turn to page 166, PDF page 166? So Mr. Resnick, on PDF page 166, it states that there's a supply and demand assessment for normal water years within this integrated regional urban water management plan area, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And do you see the table 5.4?
Yes, the regional water budget summary.
Okay, can we also scroll down to the next page? So does this appear to be a supply and demand assessment for the region that's being assessed within this plan
Yes.
for a normal water year?
Yes.
And does it account for a source of supply from stormwater capture and reuse? If we scroll back up to the first page.
This is, just an objection in terms of the witness already indicated he's not familiar with this document. I understand trying to ask questions about the document, but again, he hasn't had time to review the document and has already testified he's not familiar with it.
Noted. I'll allow you to proceed, Mr. Ferguson, and just with a similar caveat. I imagine you're going somewhere with this, but it is the probative value may be questionable if Mr. Resnick isn't familiar with it, but you may have something else in mind.
No, I appreciate that, and I understand. I heard what he said. So Mr. Resnick, under the heading stormwater capture, is it your understanding that this reflects a source of supply from the capture of stormwater in the region?
It seems like that, yes.
Okay. And it reflects the years 2025 through 2045, correct?
Correct, yes.
And is it showing an increase in stormwater capture over that time period?
Yeah, under the active recharge, I don't know what the footnote is referencing, but yeah, it's showing an increase in active recharge.
Okay. Can we scroll down to the next page as part of table 5.4? Do you see the line item under storage that says SWP from storage sites reservoir.
Yep.
And so does it appear that this plan contemplates a supply from sites reservoir starting in 2040?
Yep. And again, I don't know what the footnote 15 says, but yes.
So from a planning perspective, at least it's as it's represented here in table 5.4, stormwater capture and reuse is not a new supply that serves as an alternative to sites reservoir, correct?
I don't think you can go that far in a conclusion because they count for some, but could they do even more conservation? Could they do more stormwater capture? I just don't have enough information here to make that claim. They certainly are accounting for some conservation in stormwater capture. I don't know if they have groundwater that could be remediated. I don't know if they have wastewater that could be recycled, or if there's, like I said, greater opportunity for conservation and stormwater capture than they're anticipating in this document. So it's, I mean, I don't know this plan. I see these plans all the time that, I hate to say it, but get used to justify projects that folks want to see.
Well, you mentioned recycled water, so could we scroll back up to the previous page? So there is a line item there at the bottom of the page for recycled water as a supply source, correct?
Yep.
And so it appears that they're anticipating an increase in use of recycled water, correct?
Yeah, from about 28,000 acre feet to about 45,000 acre feet, roughly.
Okay. So at least it appears that within this plan, that they anticipate the need for stormwater as a supply, recycled water as a supply, and sites reservoir as a supply, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And can we just quickly scroll down to PDF page 171? Oh, one more page, sorry, 172. I'm sorry. Can we go back up to 169, please? Just a couple more questions about this document. Great. Mr. Resnick, does this appear to be a projection of supplies and demand for a wet year within the region contemplated in this plan?
That is what it looks like, yes.
And do you see the section titled Stormwater Capture?
Yep.
And this table 5.5, shows considerably more stormwater capture in a wet year than we looked at in a normal year, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so you mentioned you weren't sure whether more could be done in terms of stormwater capture, but is that correct?
Yeah. Obviously more is going to happen in a wet year than in a dry year. So that makes sense. I don't mean to be contrarian. It just, looking at a WIMP like this without any sort of basic concept, if we go back to sort of what I was saying with planning, which is you set what are your priorities and your goals, and you evaluate those, and then based on that evaluation, you set specific targets, smart targets. I talked about our SMART objectives, specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, time certain, that are based on basically best practice and investing in your best alternatives first and maximally. I mean, that is my philosophy. And so what I don't know in all this, and again, I mean, I can give you real world examples where reports like this have gotten used to justify projects that really weren't needed. I can think of at least 2 ocean desal projects that would fit the bill for that. It's hard for me to say, like, could stormwater capture in a wet year be even 150,000 acre foot? I don't know. And so just because it has all of them doesn't mean it conforms with what I'm saying, which is you maximally invest to do best practice in those strategies that provide the most benefits. Maybe they did a really good job here, and the most you could squeeze out of conservation and wastewater recycling and stormwater is what they have in there. And so then they have to go to other sources, but there's no way looking at this. I mean, it would take a full assessment of this report to probably expertise beyond mine, that they are really squeezing the most they can out of what I would view as the best alternatives. I'm not trying to be contrarian. You're trying to get me to weigh in on things that there just is not enough information here to accurately weigh in on.
Okay. Let's real quickly turn to the remediation of groundwater, and this will be my last set of questions. So we can take this exhibit down. At least with respect to remediating groundwater, Mr. Resnick, I think you mentioned that groundwater has become less viable because of lack of recharge from infiltration, correct?
Yeah, certainly in LA. But I mean, we're reversing it, but yes, and contamination. You had aerospace in the San Fernando Valley, seawater intrusion in the West Basin, and also heavy industrial pollution in the Central Basin. So yes, but a lot of that is being worked to be reversed.
Okay. So one of the issues you see with respect to, when you consider remediation of groundwater, one of the strategies is addressing this lack of recharge from infiltration that's occurred because of the hardscaping. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, LA, each groundwater basin is unique based on the soil. Some are harder to infiltrate, where you need to do, infiltration wells anyway. But some, like the Upper LA River, actually have great natural soils if you weren't sort of paving over. And that's probably where the greatest opportunity for large scale groundwater capture and recharge is, in the San Fernando Valley Basin.
So are you aware that Southern California agencies participating in the sites project rely on imported supplies to help manage groundwater conditions, specifically by recharging groundwater?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Are you aware that Southern California agencies participating in the sites project rely on imported water supplies to help manage groundwater conditions through either vector in the recharge?
Yeah, I mean, generally, because I don't know everybody who's involved with sites, but yeah, generally I do know that is how that agencies do that. Correct.
Okay. So would you anticipate that with additional imported supplies from the sites project, these agencies could address the issues that you're concerned about with respect to recharging the basins?
Well, look, I mentioned in my written testimony, the Watershed Replenishment District is one of the largest agencies, groundwater management agencies in the state. They have a program, Water Independence Now, WIN, to just fully, wean off of imported and use local for recharge. I think the San Fernando Basin, which offers the best opportunity, it's really about cleaning the existing groundwater, which is already happening with LADWP, and then finding really big opportunities for new spreading grounds. I think we actually already know where a lot of that is. We just need to get the land and develop the project. So it's a long way of saying I don't know the role that sites would necessarily play in the groundwater recharge. Again, I think a lot of that can just be done locally to clean up the existing contaminated groundwater and and then look for, larger opportunities, preferably with heavy green space components, to develop new spreading grounds for recharge and pulling up hardscape. Like I said earlier, LA has 800,000 to 1 million acre feet of hardscape, and the more we can do to be pulling up, and that's been one of the other shortcomings so far, safe clean water, but an identified goal to increase. That's to me, that's sort of the preferable approach to take.
But imported water could be used in these spreading basins, correct? To recharge
Yeah.
basins. Okay. I want to address a few comments you made during your summary presentation.
Sure.
You mentioned that planning should be conducted at kind of the local, regional, and then the statewide scale, correct?
Yeah, ideally. I mean, there's so many water agencies in LA. I mean, in California, well, LA and California.
But are you suggesting a process where agencies kind of scale up from the local to the statewide? But
yeah, I mean, I think it would be iterative. I mean, I know water agencies like their control, but that was always an issue when I was at PCL, and I worked a lot on the state, DWR's state water plan, which really was a compilation. It wasn't a plan. And I develop a lot of strategic plans, campaign plans. I mean, that's sort of what I do. And I laid out the steps, and that is not what was happening. I think the state water plan's gotten better at that, but I mean, we are, look, however you feel on the project, I think we're all on this Zoom probably recognize, like, we are facing multiple crises, and water is one of them, and we've gotta think really smartly about how we develop those future water sources and be as strategic, as visionary, and invest as wisely as possible. And water planning still, with the hundreds if not thousands of water agencies, it still feels very piecemeal in the overall planning approach.
would you agree, based on some of the planning documents we just looked at, that the sites project beneficiaries, at least located in Southern California, or I should say including those in Southern California, are planning from kind of this local to statewide manner by first considering their local demands and supplies, coordinating regionally, and then looking for statewide cooperative opportunities for their planning purposes as well, by engaging in the sites project, for example.
I mean, I would say some of that happens, but is it happening? Is it happening in as sort of a thoughtful, strategic way as I think it needs to happen? No. I mean, one only needs to look at the split of Metropolitan Water District right now to kind of gauge how difficult it is to get everybody aligned on a common vision for water. And the fact that some agencies want to invest in a sites or a Delta conveyance or an LA aqueduct realignment or other things does not mean that we are yet really sitting down and laying out a real vision for resilient, sustainable, equitable local water policy, which might entail lots of things, not only around projects, but around policy changes as well.
Okay. I think you were serious when you referred to yourself as a crazy environmentalist, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Wait, that I was serious or not serious?
No, I understood you just say that you refer to yourself as a crazy
Well, no,
environmentalist. Is
no.
that
What I was
accurate?
saying is I was saying it as a joke, right?
Oh, you were.
I
Okay.
hope you get that. I am a Berkeley educated law school master's of environment. Well, all but coursework in 25 years, running pretty successful environmental organizations. So, what the point that I was trying to make is, no matter how people look at environmentalists, even if you look at us as crazy environmentalists, it's not just us saying like we need better planning, we need to prioritize investments. A select assembly committee said that MWD is developing a climate adaptation plan for water, Camp for Water, that's putting water resilience at the first, foremost. You've got, LA County was not always the most progressive around environmental issues. They have in our county plan and the county water plan, environmentalists have been advocating for the same with the city. So it was a joke. It was more meant to say that this is not just environmentalists that are pushing the kind of approach that, I think we just got there a little bit early on the environmental side, so maybe just call us a little bit more visionary. But and we've got a pretty big bandwagon that is pushing around resilient local water. And it's nice that everybody's coming on board.
So it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying that your environmental values are informing your opinions.
Yeah. I mean, I think your values should, inform, and not only environment. I'm somebody who's actually spent a lot of my career tying environment to social justice and civil rights and all that, and equity, and addressing environmental injustice. So yeah, I think all that. Yeah.
I have no further questions. I really appreciate your time and your patience, Mr. Resnick, particularly with that one exhibit.
It's all good. There's just a lot in water. I
Thank
can
you,
only read so many documents, and those were not ones I had read.
With that, I will turn to my list. Mr. Soderlund, do you have questions for Mr. Resnick?
I do not. Thank you.
Ms. Auftenberg or any other representative from the Bureau of Reclamation, do you have questions for Mr. Resnick?
Hello, this is Amy Auftenberg, and no, we do not.
Thank you. And Ms. Mendel-Rice?
Yes, we do.
Please, go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Resnick. My name is Jenna Mandel-Rice, and I represent the state water contractors.
Excellent.
I'd like to first just ask you a few clarifying questions about your written testimony. So if we could pull that up. And I'd like to go to page 7 and line 23. So on line 23 here, you reference LA County. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then on the next line, line 24, about 2/3 of the way across the line, you reference LA. Is that correct?
Yes, I do sometimes use interchangeably.
And so when you're using LA without an additional descriptive term like county, what are you referring to?
I mean, in this instance, I was still referring to the county, which had been the.
And is that consistent throughout your testimony that unless there's a different description, like LA region, when you use LA, are you using LA to refer to LA County?
I would have to go back through the testimony. I would say if it's part of this where it's like there's clear, it says LA County at the beginning and then LA, I'm doing the shorthand. It probably refers to what was at the beginning part of the sentence, but I would have to go back and look through and clean it up. And it's most famous because of Mulholland, and there it is, take it, and the LA Aqueduct. But the importing of water, as I said, the State Water Project, MWD, the creation of MWD to bring from the Colorado, it really is, it is a countywide and a region-wide problem of building a region of 24 million people without without enough water, where we need to take it from lots of other places, often very, very far away, with lots of impacts on those communities and waterways.
This is
Yeah.
not a gotcha. I'm really
Yeah.
just trying to understand
Yeah.
what we're talking about. So I understand what you just said to mean that you'd have to go back through and kind of check every reference.
Assume LA region is probably the right way. And when I say LA region, I'm tending to talk countywide, because that's the jurisdiction of LA Waterkeeper. Waterkeepers tend to be divided on either watershed lines or county lines, and we're a county line.
And so when we look up to line 17 of the same page, you use the term LA region, not LA County. And so are those one and the same, or?
Yeah, usually when I refer to region, I'm usually talking countywide, because that's our jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you. If we can scroll down to page 8, and we have kind of a number of bullets on this page. And again, this is for clarification purposes. For example, right, in this bullet, you reference the first bullet, line 1, you reference LA relies on. And are we talking about the county?
That's county, because it's about 60% is probably more accurate than nearly 2/3. The city is usually 80 to 90%, but it's been 90% the last few years. So that's definitely county.
Bullet, yeah, thank you. And for this bullet, you haven't cited any documents or studies. Can you tell us what the source of this information is?
This would be from the LA County Sustainability Plan. It's called the Our County Plan.
Okay, and then I'm going to ask you that same question for a number of other bullets on this page. So for the second bullet, what is the source of the information provided in this bullet?
Most of this, because not all of our agencies are have something like the Our County Plan, where a lot of information is compiled in one place. So a lot of this I was having to bring in from different places, but the 600 million gallons of sewage, that is looking at LA County Sanitation District, and LA Sanitation, which is the city. LA County Sanitation District is the unincorporated county and 78 cities, so 5 million people. Cities about 4 million. So it's really just going to their websites and fact sheets I have from them and putting it together. The 100 million gallons of runoff per day, and then 5 billion, that's mostly coming from county flood control district totals. And again, I just have fact sheets from those agencies, or you can look on their website. I think it's even on the Safe Clean Water Program website.
And so besides those documents that you just listed, are there any other documents that you relied on to support the factual assertions that are in this bullet?
No, I think most of these, like I said, the sewage came from looking at LA Sanitation and LA County San. Stormwater is mostly flood control district, and Safe Clean Water Program, which the county flood control district manages the Safe Clean Water Program.
Okay, then same question on the third bullet. We haven't cited anything here. What is the basis of this statement?
The rivers being concretized flood protection channels. Trying to think of an actual. I'm trying to think of an actual document. I mean, if you're in LA, you know that the LA River is a flood control channel. If you watch Grease or Terminator 2, you know that's just what they are. I mean, photographic evidence. Common knowledge. I mean, there is an LA River master plan that the county did. The city also has a master plan. There's also an upper LA River master plan and a lower LA River master plan, and so it's just just what it is. I mean, the LA River, for example, and I may not be getting these numbers exactly right, but of the 51 miles of LA River, it's I think it's less than 2 miles that don't have any channelization on the bottom or side. I mean, so 49 miles have some level of channelization, and probably a good chunk of that is 100% channelized, meaning bottom as well as sides.
And I think we can skip the fourth bullet, but I'm going to have the same question for you on the fifth bullet on this page, which I know is not currently on the screen. And so again, can you just provide a list of the sources that you used to support this bullet?
The water sector, that's an old California Energy Commission report. It's quite old now. I wish somebody would update it, but it's an old California Energy Commission report that we can dig up.
Do you happen to know the date of that report?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I'm sorry, I didn't get that question. And if
Do you
you
happen
could
to know
slow
the
down,
date of that report?
Mr. Resnick, if you could slow down a little bit, that would be great.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sorry again.
And I'm sorry, the question?
Do you happen to know the date of that report?
I do not. I mean, it was quite old, so I'm guessing at least 10 or 15 years, but I don't know the date of that report.
Okay, thank you. So if we could go to page 14 and lines 1 through 3. And I apologize, we might need to scroll up just a little bit to the bottom of 13 so Mr. Resnick can have the context of this. But we'll be eventually talking about those lines 1 through 3. So to me, it looks like starting on about line 24, you're talking about the LA County Safe Clean Water Program in this paragraph. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then if we can scroll down to page 14. And so on lines 1 through 3, you're still discussing the Safe Clean Water Program, correct?
Correct.
And these lines state that once completed, it is estimated that up to an additional 50,000 acre feet per year of water will be captured and reused through already approved projects, potentially providing enough water for 553,000 residents. And again, I think I'm just looking to understand what is the source or the basis of this statement.
That is the Flood Control District prepares reports on the Safe Clean Water Program every year. So it's one of their annual reports of the Safe Clean Water Program.
And are you aware of whether the projects that are referenced in this paragraph are fully funded through construction and operation?
I'm not 100% sure, and it is project by project. I'm sure some are fully funded. My guess would be, I shouldn't say I'm sure, but my guess would be some are fully funded, some are not fully funded, and that's part of the reason that I do try to put the qualifier of up to and potentially, because I know we have a target, which I had mentioned earlier in testimony, of really ramping up the water supply, but I think I recognize that there is some uncertainty about what will be achieved from the current projects.
And so these projects may or may not happen, or some of them may or may not happen.
Correct. I mean, I think most will, but it is possible some don't get the full funding and return funds or what have you.
And so again, on line 3, you said it might provide water for up to 553,000 residents. How many residents are in LA County?
Around 10 million.
Going down to page 14, lines 6 through 9, so I think we're on the right page here. You say, during the 2023 to 2024 storm season, October through April, which wasn't nearly as wet as the prior year, an estimated 120 billion gallons, or 373,500 acre feet, was captured for reuse, enough to serve nearly 3 million people, or to meet nearly a third of LA County's total annual demand. Is that a correct reading of your testimony here?
Yes.
And what was the basis for this statement?
These numbers are all coming from the flood control district. Most of them have been reported on in media outlets as well, like the LA Times.
Would it surprise you if I told you that LA County's website states that for the October 2023 through the April 2024 period, there was 96.3 billion gallons of captured rainfall?
Maybe there was some adjustment. One way or the other. Maybe they realized they didn't capture as much. Maybe the website's a little out of date. It's still a good chunk, but yeah, I'd have to figure out where that 120 came from.
Okay. Have you ever been employed by Metropolitan Water District of Southern California to work on its water planning process?
Employed? No.
And have you ever been employed by Los Angeles Department of Water and Power to work on its water planning process?
No.
Do you agree that cost effectiveness is important to determining which water supply solutions should be pursued?
Yes, but defining cost effectiveness, I think, is challenging.
In your testimony, you identify several alternatives to importing water to the Los Angeles region from Sites Reservoir. Have you personally done any cost analysis for how these alternatives compare to the cost of importing water from sites?
No, I have not. I'm trying to think if I've seen anything, probably not directly to sites. The point that I would make, and this is where I was saying cost effectiveness is challenging, is I'm a believer that cost effectiveness should be based on full cost accounting, meaning if you have one project that maybe can get built and deliver, and I will acknowledge oftentimes gray infrastructure projects can do things cost effectively on, at first glance. But if that's exacerbating environmental harms, and I'm not saying this is about sites, but I'm just saying generally it's exacerbating environmental harms, community harms, contributing to climate change, heat island, all these things, those all have very real economic impacts as well as community environmental. If you're doing green infrastructure, as I was talking about at length during the previous questioning, oftentimes the green infrastructure can sequester carbon. It can provide recreational, improved health outcomes, reduced asthma. I mean, the list goes on and on. If you're doing it at schools, enhance school performance. It's almost a never-ending list of benefits, which also have economic benefits as well. And so I absolutely think cost effectiveness should be factored, but if and only if we are actually looking at full cost accounting principles, which is almost never done, if ever done.
But you haven't done any analysis, even on your full evaluation of cost effectiveness of the solutions you identify versus Sites Reservoir?
No, I have not.
If we go down to page 20, go to line 16. And I perhaps have, are we on page 20? No, I've lost the exhibit. Okay, and then line 16, please. And I apologize, I might have 15, page 20, line 15, you state that we simply cannot afford to invest in projects that will distract us from our conversion to local water. What do you mean by afford in this sentence?
I certainly meant the economic side of afford, meaning, as I've said and acknowledged, we've got, $25 billion worth of local projects that I think provide a lot more benefit. And if you're starting to add billions to other things, and again, because I'm speaking more about what we're trying to do locally, I'm not even just referring to sites, but Delta Conveyance, other types of projects, it is literally going to become unaffordable from an economic. I think I was also frankly using the term a little bit more broadly and just saying we have to, as Greta Thunberg says, like, our house is on fire and we're still not really acting like it, and we have to start realizing that the old way of business just doesn't work in today's world.
So I think at the beginning of that, you mentioned that you were talking about afford in the economic sense. So I'd like to just focus on that for a moment. You are not an economist, correct?
Absolutely not.
And have you personally completed any economic analysis regarding what the people in LA County and Southern California can afford in the economic sense?
No.
Isn't it true that there are multiple public water agencies and districts in the LA County and Southern California region?
Yes.
Isn't it true that those entities are pursuing multiple water supply projects concurrently?
Yes.
And you have not personally performed any economic analysis of what the Metropolitan Water District of California can afford from an economic standpoint?
No, not any kind of analysis.
And you have not performed any type of economic analysis of what LADWP can afford from an economic standpoint. Is that correct?
Correct.
I think I'd like to go back up to page 12 now and go to line 17. You note here that the LA region has had a successful conservation record that has occurred over the past 5 decades. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I noted that earlier, I think, in some of the questions.
And do you know how much money the LA region has invested to date to achieve this level of conservation?
I do not.
On page 14, and I apologize, Miss Mellon, I'm making you earn your lunch today. Lines 22 through 23. You state that it is imperative that we have the capacity to capture as much rainfall as possible during wet years. Is that correct?
Correct.
And do you understand that the purpose of Sites Reservoir is to capture and store water from major storms so that it is available to California communities, farms, and the environment during dry periods?
Yes. Although I was referring more towards local water. I'm always a believer in capturing and using as close to source as possible.
I would just note, the council, when she's taking quotes from here, she's taking like the last phrase of a sentence and not including the entire sentence. And just, I'm going to note that for the record.
Mr. Resnick can correct me if I misstate his testimony in any way. On page 15, I believe you discuss, just in general, page 15 in general, you discuss purifying wastewater as one option that is an alternative to importing water. Yeah. Is that correct? Do you generally discuss purifying wastewater? Thank you. And if we go down to page 18, I believe you state, I apologize, I wish I had a line number here. I believe you state that Los Angeles County currently uses a little less than 1.2 billion gallons of water a day.
Yes, I mean, it varies by precipitation and temperature, but yeah, roughly.
And again, these are just going to be clarifying questions. And just what is the source of that 1.2 billion gallon figure?
I
think it's 1.2 billion gallons a day, not a year.
Oh, sorry, I may have misstated that. The 1.2 billion, it's a good question. We've been at this a while. My brain is a little foggy. I have seen that. I'm sure it's probably county documents because it is a county number. It probably from the R County plan or the county water plan. But I would have to double check.
And then on 18 through 19, lines 18 through 19 of this page, you state that the region imports around 60% of this, and I think you do your math, so you say it's about 720 million gallons per day. And here, are you referencing the LA region or Los Angeles?
LA County, yeah, LA County, and that definitely comes from the R County sustainability plan. That's 60% total.
Okay. And then just going down to page 18, lines 19 through 20, you state that conservation, perhaps combined with population loss, should reduce our overall consumption by 100 million gallons per day to 200 million gallons per day, or perhaps more by 2040. And just for clarification purposes, is this for LA County or a different geographical boundary?
It's for LA County.
Okay. And again, what is the source of this figure that you provided here?
At the low end, it's pretty aligned with, I think, what the Making Conservation a California Way of Life regs would require. At the higher end, that's me just projecting out based on historic trends where, and if there are projected population losses where we might be able to get to.
So for that higher number, you don't have a citation. It's
more, yeah, it's my own.
And then on lines 20 through 22, you state that wastewater recycling should yield another 330 million gallons per day to 350 million gallons per day by 2045, with additional capacity for more recycling possible after that, particularly from the LACSD.
Yes.
Is that a correct reading of this paragraph? And what is the source of that information?
So the city of LA, which is called Pure Water LA, it used to be called Operation Next and Hyperion 2035. Their goal is 180 million gallons a day of new recycled water. I may be going a little bit, but just for clarity, they already partner with West Basin to recycle about 35 million gallons a day. The city actually wants to take over that, so their actual estimate is higher. It's well over 200 million gallons a day, but that would be double counting the West Basin number that's already being recycled. So it's about 180 of new recycled water. They might be able to get up to 190, but 180 is a little bit safer. And then 150 is what the LA County Sanitation District project, that's a partnership with Matt, and that's Pure Water Southern California. There goes 150. So 150 and 180 gets you the 330, saying we could maybe do another 20 million beyond that. Las Virgenes is looking at small, but a few million gallons. There's a couple other small projects. and that also LA County Sanitation District, they actually discharge, I think, about 260, 280 million gallons a day to the ocean. So they're 150. They actually have more capacity if they wanted to go bigger than 150. So yeah, 180 for the city, 150 for LA County Sanitation, and those numbers are pretty published pretty frequently in like their own documents.
Thank you for that clarification. Do you understand that there are water quality standards that apply to recycled water that influence what water can be used for recycling?
Yeah.
Which LA water sources meet those salinity requirements? The salinity requirements that are part of those water quality standards.
I am not sure.
Are you aware that Metropolitan Water District is a wholesale water supplier to Los Angeles Department of Water and Power?
Yes.
And LADWP provides water service to Los Angeles?
Yes.
Are you aware of that? And are you aware that some of Los Angeles's water sources do not meet the salinity requirements for recycled water?
Clarification. You mean City of Los Angeles, County of Los Angeles?
We'll go with the broader geographic area. In the County of Los Angeles, are you aware that any of the water sources used within that geographic boundary do not meet salinity requirements for recycled water?
I generally know that there are water sources where salinity is an issue. So I am not expert enough in those regulations to like definitively say yes to your answer, but I do know there are water sources that do have salinity issues, and that is why some level of imported water, and again, the county is still saying 20% is needed. So I mean, it's generally a yes to your question. I just don't know enough to like say yes to your very precise question.
Are you aware that similar to the proposed site's reservoir, state water project water comes from the Bay Delta watershed?
Yes.
And are you aware that water from the state water project meets the salinity standards for recycled water?
I'll give the same answer. I know that it is better on salinity, which is why it's helpful to have some of that water. I'm not as an expert on the exact standards.
Are you aware that Metropolitan Water District's water recycling projects rely on state water project water supplies in large part because of the quality of the water from the Bay Delta watershed?
I would say generally I know that. I don't know how much is being relied on that versus other sources.
Going down on page 22, and I believe it's, sorry, we're on the correct page. My notes are bad here. You can stay on this page, and then lines 22 through 23, you state that increases in stormwater capture to recharge our aquifers while cleaning up our groundwater should yield another 100 million gallons per day to 200 million gallons per day in the same time frame. When you refer to our aquifers,
countywide, so it'd be San Fernando Valley, West Basin, Central Basin, San Gabriel are the main ones.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? That would be
San Fernando Valley Basin, Central Basin, West Coast Basin, San Gabriel Basin.
And the same would be true for the reference of our groundwater?
Yes.
Okay. And what is the source of this information?
So the cleaning up the groundwater is really from the agencies that are undertaking that. So LADWP has a target, I think it's 86,000 acre feet, but don't 100% quote me on that. But they have identified that in their planning documents. WRD, the Water Replenishment District, has identified what brackish desal of the West Coast Basin. I think that's 60,000 acre feet, as well as some additional cleanup in Central Basin. So that's for the groundwater remediation. And then in terms of stormwater capture, I'm using, and I think actually fairly conservatively, the target of the Safe Clean Water program that I mentioned earlier. Which again, the target that they talk about is capacity, so it is a little bit harder to define what capacity, how that actually turns out in a typical, year, what the actual yield would be, because capacity isn't the same as yield.
And you would expect the yield to be less.
Yeah, most years.
Are you aware that the Regional Water Quality Control Board groundwater basin plans and salt and nutrient management plans impose salinity requirements for water that can be used for groundwater recharge?
Yes.
And do you know which water sources in LA County or that provide water to LA County meet those salinity standards?
I do not.
Are you aware that some of Los Angeles County's water sources do not meet the salinity requirements?
I will give you the same answer I gave. I know some local sources have salinity issues because I don't know what the regulations require in any specificity. I can't answer your precise question, but I know that yes, there are some local sources that generally have salinity issues.
And are you aware that Metropolitan Water District's groundwater recharge projects rely on state water project supplies?
Yes.
And again, you understand that state water project supplies come from the Bay Delta watershed, just like the site's reservoir project water would come from.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes, and so I just want to make sure, again, and I think you've answered this, but are you aware that the proposed site's reservoir project and state water project water come from the Bay Delta watershed?
Yes.
And I apologize, I need to double check my page number on this. Page 18, lines 24 through 26. You state that with this in mind, one can see how we can achieve and perhaps even exceed the county's 80% and the city of LA's 70% local water goals over the next 2 decades and dramatically reduce the need for imported water into the region. Is that a correct reading of those lines?
Yes.
Does this statement depend on your assumption regarding the amount of water that could be conserved, recycled, or recharged to groundwater?
Yes, it does. But I would also note the 80% and 70% are totals that the county itself and the city of LA respectively have identified themselves as their targets.
Even based on those assumed goals, your testimony recognizes that LA County would still need to import some water. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Mendel-Rice. Based on the time, I'll look back to you, Mr. Mooney. Do you have redirect questions for Mr. Resnick?
No, I do not.
All right. Then with that, Mr. Resnick, thank you so much for your testimony today. Thank you for participating, and you are excused.
Thank you very much, and apologize again for my quick speaking.
It's Ms. Cotta is very good and is not afraid to chime in, which is helpful.
Ms. Kenzie?
Yes.
Before we move on, I just want to clarify my statement earlier regarding objections. It was and Mr. Resnick's testimony. It was really just stating that we have no scope objections to his testimony at this time, but reserve any other objections till the time we move Exhibit 6.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. That makes sense. We have, it's 20 minutes to noon, so we could take our lunch break now, which may be convenient, and then reconvene at about 12:40. Or we could hear, I believe Mr. Asarian is next, or we could hear a summary of testimony from Mr. Asarian. I will look to you, Mr. Mooney, since you're off mute. Do you have a preference either way?
No, I don't have a preference.
This is Eric Busher. I just have one question. We would, Mr. Asarian can go over till tomorrow. We need to get Dr. Michaels done today. We're happy to switch the order if the authority or the other parties think the cross-examination of Mr. Asarian is going to be as lengthy as Mr. Resnick's was. If we think that one's going to be pretty short, I think we got plenty of time in the afternoon to complete both of them. I just want to make sure that if we're not going to get through all three witnesses, that we do Dr. Michaels next.
That's helpful. Thank you, Mr. Busher. Mr. Ferguson, comments on that one, and then I'll also ask Ms. Mendel-Rice just because she had more questions for Mr. Resnick.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the time. I probably have an hour for each.
And maybe let me ask it this way. Mr. Ferguson, do you have any objection to switching the order of Mr. Michael and Mr. Asarian?
No, that'd be fine.
We could just do it and then, but I'll turn to you. Ms. Mendel-Rice, do you have?
I only have questions for Dr. Michael, I believe, and not the same length as for Mr. Asarian, but I have no objection to switching the order.
If Mr. Busher, would that be, I think let's just switch the order and then we can avoid any, if there's any, anyway, it will work better. And then we'll know.
Yeah. I'm fine with that. I'm going to ask to take the lunch break because I told
Right.
Dr. Michaels he would testify after lunch,
Sure,
but
yeah.
I assume that we can all be back on at 12:45 and get started with that.
Yes, so my proposal is we go ahead and take a lunch break. Are there any procedural issues before we break, other than what we just talked about? All right, then let's go ahead and take an hour and we will return at 12:45 p.m. Please be prepared to log back onto the Zoom for our afternoon session. Thank you.